Tech in dating is not the enemy, but I think generally speaking, there's a fatigue with dating apps and the endless swiping and the anonymity of it. How my friends make me feel and how they support me is the base level of what I would need a romantic partner to also do.
Candice Gallagher. Candice had senior marketing roles in fashion brands as well as cutting-edge fintech companies before she went full-time in the dating events business and science-backed relationship pairing.
In a romantic setting, you have to look at someone 7 times for them to finally get the signal or the belief that you are interested in them, and maybe they can approach you or you can approach them. Be kind to yourself, trust your instincts, and be physically and mentally open.
On this episode of PSI Love Me, we have Candice Gallagher, a former leading marketeer who now works in the business of dating. Candice had senior marketing roles in fashion brands for the likes of Macy's and Zalingo, as well as cutting-edge fintech companies before she went full-time in the dating events business and science-backed relationship pairing. She now has over 150,000 followers across her social media platforms, where Candice shares honest and humorous observations about modern dating life under the account name Candilicious. So welcome, Candice. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to kind of dive into all topics dating and beyond with you.
So what led you from fashion and fintech marketeer into the business of dating? I was reading that you posted something on TikTok to Singaporeans to see if they'd be interested in such an event, and it kind of all went a bit crazy.
Exactly right. It was sort of like a happy accident. I, on a personal level, have always been very open about dating. So much so that I tell the internet about it. That's what I post a lot on my social media pages. And so I kind of built a bit of a reputation for being someone who spoke about dating. And then I saw a video from a group in the US called Matchbox, who were hosting dating events in just what I thought to be a really fresh way. So I stitched the video and and sort of made this sort of, cry to Singapore. Is there anybody in Singapore who also thinks this is cool? The video blew up. I ended up with a wait list of 4,000 people. And next thing you know, I ended up becoming the host and founder of a dating event company for single Singaporeans called Singapore. And it's just sort of taken on a life of its own. And I've been really enjoying it. And I think that's because more than ever, I have such personal alignment with professional pursuits. And that's when you love your job, if you really are interested in it and curious in it personally. So I'm really excited to see where it goes and, both continuing it in Singapore and across the world.
How do your dating events actually work, and what format have you tried and tested over the years to really fine tune it?
So think of it as a classic offline event, but with a technological twist. Tech in dating is not the enemy, but I think generally speaking, there's a fatigue with dating apps and the endless swiping and the anonymity of it. So what I do is I bring people together at the venue. So I figure out the day, the time, the place. For heterosexual events, I make sure that I have an equal ratio of men and women, because when people arrive, I get them to take this 3-minute questionnaire. And during the event, I use the algorithm, which is based on relationship science, to find everybody's most compatible match based on values. So I'm not asking any questions about, what's your physical preferences or what's your salary or anything like that. And the algorithm then calculates it based on who's in the room. And there's this sort of grand reveal. And then there's this fun chaos where everyone gets a text message with the name of the person they were matched with and why they were matched, what qualities do they share? And then it's sort of, okay, well, in the hour that I've been at this event, did I already meet that person? Which one is he? And then this sort of, that's why I say fun chaos, people going around the room trying to be like, are you Bob? No. Do you know who Bob is? And this sort of sense of discovery. So, you asked about what makes this event different, or what have I learned in the process of doing these events? And the reality is people still need help right? Because whether it need help attending something or going to something that is organized specifically for single people or using an app, or, they need help facilitating interactions with other single people. And so in the first few events I did, I had icebreaker games. I had like a matchmaking bingo card, find someone in the room who X, or question prompts. Here's a bunch of questions you can use to talk to people. But people still need a little bit more facilitation. And so what I'm working on now is organizing events that have an activity involved in it as well, be it a wine tasting or a comedy show or playing paddle. That's kind of what the 2025 event plan looks like for me.
It's interesting what you say, you're matching up with values, not interests, not kind of what you're actually looking for. It's purely on values. And what kind of questions are you asking on the questionnaire?
What's really fun is that I actually get to influence the composition of the questionnaire. The questions have been preset, but there's a bank of like 2,500 questions, and I get to pick and choose which ones I think make the most sense. And I like to have a balance between things that are quite pivotal to someone's life, be it about feelings about religion or family, with also something a little bit more lighthearted. So my questionnaires have everything from my parents' opinion of my partner really matters, not at all, a lot, all the way to I believe in aliens, not at all, a lot. Just to kind of keep the experience lighthearted, but also well-rounded.
What are your experiences with apps versus kind of dating events? Are you still on the apps?
No, not right now. It's sort of a bit of a love-hate relationship, as I think it is for a lot of people. I have gone on again, off again dating apps probably 20 plus times in my life. And it has always been the same cycle for me. It's been, okay, let's go do this. Let's be positive. Let's be open-minded. And you get a bit of momentum. And then you get the fatigue starts to set in, and then maybe something's unrequited, or you get ghosted, or you have a bad date. And my overall energy and enthusiasm for it starts to dwindle. And then there's usually a tipping point, and I sort of look at myself and think, wait a minute, I'm not enjoying this. Get off, recover. And then I'm like, well, time to go back on the cycle again. And, there's that phrase, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so that's really what's kind of made me pivot personally from being on apps to attending events myself, let alone also hosting them.
You're so right. I mean, you've really got to have a cloak of resilience on these dating apps and a bit of a strategy as well to meander your way through the good, the bad, and the ugly, pardon the pun. But it's a wild world out there. And especially when, you're a busy woman at work and, you've trying to carve out time to find your person. It's a lot to deal with.
It's a lot. And look, people have different communication styles. And then that's compounded with the dynamic of an app, because it's not like a WhatsApp, which is much quicker fire back and forth. And so I find that the process just gets dragged out longer. And I just had too many disappointments from people I've never even met that I've only shared a few words with. And it's not to say apps are all bad, and not at all. I have tried a lot of them, probably about 10 different apps in different countries, and I have had some good experiences. But in my case, I've never had a good enough experience that turned into a relationship. And so that's what makes me think perhaps that the forum of an app, isn't best suited to someone like me. But, never say never.
I totally agree with you. It's, you really have to have some resilience and energy to navigate them. And on a daily basis, my podcast with Talia from Dating Intentionally, she shares some of the strategies to navigate the apps. But I think with in-person events, you immediately get whether you're into someone or not. That chemistry, I know when I've been on dates, like within the first 30 seconds, whether you're into someone or not, right? And I think that is the beauty of meeting people in person is, you have those conversations. It's a lot quicker than going back and forth on the apps. And you're also there and you're present. You're not hiding behind anything or an app or your profile. And with an event, you've made that commitment to show up. So you kind of mean business. I'm here to meet someone. I'm not like, oh, I'm on a rebound, let's just go on the app, or let's just have a little bit of fun, or I'm saying I want something, but I really mean the other thing. When you're at a dating event, you really mean business, don't you? So I'm guessing the people that you have attending your events, they really are up for meeting someone genuine.
And I like the fact that you use the word show up, right? Like, you're showing up physically, you're physically making the effort to go there, but also I think emotionally and mentally. And what I found attending events myself is that in itself, an event can also be very overwhelming. There's tens, if not hundreds of people in a room, and you've got to go up to strangers and be like, hi, let's talk. But what I do, and I reckon, I'm a very extroverted person, so I don't struggle so much with that, but I fully appreciate that for a lot of people, that's quite intimidating. And what I've noticed in particular, especially where there are friends who go together, they mingle much less in the room because they've got their ally that they kind of cling on to, and maybe they're even self-conscious to go and approach someone in front of their friend. Whereas when I go to events by myself, I either go and talk to people or I'll stand there by myself the entire time. So, but it is draining in itself, right? Like, let's say, if I think about one of the last events I went to, I think I had pretty decent 15-minute conversations with 8 to 10 different people. That's tiring. But I walked out so much more energized than had I done the same thing on a dating app over an extended period of time in text form only, because I got to actually interact with individuals in person. In theory, they have manners. I think a lot of manners go out the window in dating apps, ghosting be a perfect example of that. And if you come from this place of curiosity of like, okay, tell me about yourself, who are you, and see where the conversation goes. For me, if the conversation is very much like, so where are you from? How many brothers and sisters do you have? What's your job? I find myself being like, okay, already we're not that into each other. Whereas if it's much more of a conversation and you just see where it takes you, already to me, that's a good signal. So that's personally why I've been enjoying the event more. They're less emotionally draining. It's tiring because it's a night out, but it's less emotionally draining and it's a little bit more efficient, I find.
You are right, though. I mean, like on the apps, you wouldn't go up to someone in a dating event going, hi, like, what do you do for your job? Like, how long have you been single? Like, what happened in your previous relationship? How many kids you got? Are you looking for a kid, another kid? You just wouldn't go and dive straight into that. You'd actually start talking about other interesting things, like what's topical in the news or the weather that day if you're in England, because we all love talking about the weather. Or, and then, get the sense of someone's interest and their energy and their chemistry.
So I think, and I'm seeing it like across the industry, how many more events there are. Some of them are leaning into being actively anti-app, even it's in their name. Others are just putting on events alongside having an app business. And I think it's come from both the fatigue with online dating, but also still the hangover that we all have from COVID and being trapped inside for so long. I'm really curious to see how long this is going to last, right? Trends are trends. But that's why I specifically host the events that I do that is this combination of online and offline, in theory, to get the best of both worlds.
And with your dating events, how do you curate the people? Was it by age or interest, or is there any way of curation to getting the matches a little bit closer to a possibility of a relationship and a connection?
One thing that I, to be honest, underestimated and I learned very quickly was around age. The second event I ever hosted, I didn't specify the age. And what I found to be very interesting is that I ended up having a lot of guests who were young men, as young as 18, and a lot of women who were most were in their late 30s, some were even in their 50s and 60s. And so when the algorithm matched the 18-year-old man with the 38-year-old woman, neither party were very impressed with me, which fair enough. So that's one thing that I now do at all my events. I sort of specify the age range. It's not set in stone, but I specify it so people have an idea. A challenge I recently had is that I had 3 different events, and the third one was for people over the age of 42. And the women's tickets sold out like that. The men's tickets were such a drag. And I got feedback from a lot of men being like, I don't want to date a woman my own age, which as a woman pains me to hear. I think that's a whole other conversation. But then it's like, so then how do you operate within people's expectations or desires whilst also not ending up with people who are in their 50s at the same event with someone who's in their 20s? So age is the number one thing that I control for. And then the second thing that I do that I think is more of a byproduct of the events that I put on is host different types of events that have different concepts and different price points, right? Like the first event I ever hosted was in a small venue, about £30 a ticket, 2 drinks included. The last event I hosted was a 4-course sit-down dinner with drinks pairings in the home of a private chef, and that ticket was over £100. And I think already that starts to curate the guest list based on, okay, if you're the kind of person who would enjoy a supper club, hopefully then your compatibility with the other guests is going to be the same. And so that's why I'm planning right now, comedy shows and paddle events and wine tastings and a variety of different activities to A, cater to different interests, but B, try to help curate the right attendee list at each event.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And what I always say is just be open. If you're on the apps, it's great to do the apps and dating events and indulge in your interests, because you may meet someone at the paddle club or go and walk your dog at a different park because you may bump into someone with an equally cute dog that you can strike up a conversation with. It's just keeping your mind and heart open to different possibilities and not just relying on one channel. And I think you're right, like getting out and about, because a lot of us are working from home these days. We're starved of connection. As human beings, it's scientifically proven that we need connection. Like we get all those amazing oxytocin and dopamine hormones when we connect with other people. And, we are starved of connection right now. So I think events are an amazing idea. And I think it's something that is growing and becoming more popular, and especially on these interest-based dating events.
It's not a one or the other situation, right? For me personally, because I'm single, I am equally, every time I meet up with a friend, being like, do you have any single friends? I am keeping an eye on all the events that are being hosted in London. I am open to other apps that are out there. Like, you can't just sort of put all your eggs in one basket. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so I think having that diversity of approaches is also really good.
Yeah, and you're right, like being open with friends and contacts. Yeah, hey, I am single. Have you got anyone in mind that you think would be suitable for me? And I think some people are a bit shy or even ashamed of being single. I can't be seen at a dating event. I can't be seen on an app. Well, what will people think of you? You want to have a meaningful relationship. Actually, what's wrong with being single? Because you're waiting for the right person to come along. You haven't just gone with any old Tom, Dick or Harry just to be in a relationship. So I think there's something that people need to get over about being single. It's actually great being single.
Yeah, I tell you what, the first dating event I went to in London, as I was walking in the door, even though I hosted dating events myself, I was very nervous. I literally went straight to the bathroom, looked myself in the mirror and had a word with myself, like, get it together. And what I specifically said to myself is, everybody else in that room is in exactly the same position as me, right? Because it felt like my emotion and the moment felt like I am walking into a room with a giant I am single tattooed on my forehead, and I should feel self-conscious about that. And then when I sort of spoke out loud, I was like, everyone else is single. This is not a place for judgment. This is a safe space. I was fine. And always I find in really anything that I do, the idea of something is always way worse than the reality of it. The idea of, oh my gosh, I'm going to a dating event and I'm going to have to approach people and whatever is way scarier than the reality of actually walking in the front door.
And what are your tips for like striking up a conversation with a stranger, not just at a dating event? I mean, you could see a guy at the gym or someone in the park or someone in your paddle club. Like, what are your tips? I mean, you know, we're both extroverts on the whole, and we don't have a problem with striking up a conversation. I mean, I'll literally talk to anyone. But for those people who are more introverted, they don't have practice in getting out there and striking up a conversation, what are your tips?
I'm definitely not perfect at this. And I suffer from that classic thing of, if I fancy you, even from across the room, I get a bit nervous, excited, and I can't even look you in the eye. So some of the things that I have done specifically at dating events is like going to the gym or like using your muscles, you have to warm up. So maybe the first person I speak to in the room is another woman, just to build the confidence of, okay, I'm brand new in this space and I've got to talk to a stranger. At least let me talk to a safe space, someone who's the same gender as me. Then what I might do is approach a man who I'm not particularly romantically attracted to. Again, just to sort of build up that confidence. And let me straight away say, I'm not suggesting to use people for practice. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just suggesting that you have to build up your own confidence, and that takes practice. And if you take the dating aspect out of it, right? Like if I'm a heterosexual woman talking to another woman, I'm not talking to her from a dating capacity. That allows me to just sort of like calm down, settle myself in the room and build a bit of confidence. So that would be the first thing I would say is, you know, talk to people who are not the person that you fancy first. The second thing, and I've been seeing this a lot more in media and reports a lot recently, is around the importance of physicality and body language. One, right, like I just try to have open body language. I don't, try not to cross my arms. Or if I'm sitting down, try to open myself up a little bit more to the room. A friend of mine the other day told me when she was single, she would smile at everybody just to signal an openness. And I also think it's quite infectious. Like I feel happier when I smile, and then hopefully other people do too. And then I heard, I think it's a psychologist say, there's a study that it says in a romantic setting, you have to look at someone 7 times. Like you have to get eye contact with them 7 times for them to finally get the signal or the belief that you are interested in them, and maybe they can approach you or you can approach them.
Ooh, 7 times. I did not know this.
That's a lot. Like that's a lot. But, those cheeky glances across the room are pretty, can pay off. Or you can even see how they react to you, right? Like we've all been there where someone's looking at you and you're like, why are you looking at me? You know what I mean? Like you're giving them weird glances back. But so that's what I would say. It's just build your confidence talking to people and be physically open and signal that to the room. But look, I don't always do it, right? There are plenty of times where I see someone across the room and I'm like, oh my God, they're so attractive. I really fancy them. And then I do nothing about it. And then I think, well, I missed that opportunity. But then reflecting on the fact that I missed that opportunity gives me a bit more confidence to do it the next time.
Yeah, like what was it within me that I didn't go up to him? Like what was stopping me is something to do with my self-worth or my confidence that day or overall, and like reflecting on how each situation felt and impacted you.
There have been times in my life where I've also been very forward and brazen, but that's also because I felt like I got the signal from them that they were interested. And those few times it's paid off and it's been super fun. And I felt so empowered, I couldn't even get over myself. There was one time in particular where I was at a bar and I saw this guy and I just really fancied him. And I feel like we kept catching eye contact. I don't know if it was 7 times, but we kept catching eye contact. And so on the way out, I can't believe I did this. I walked over to him at the time I was living in Singapore. I walked over to him and I said, do you live in Singapore? Yes. Are you single? Yes. Do you want my number? Yes. And that was it. That was it. Yeah, because I tell you what it came down to is because so many men are visitors in Singapore. They don't necessarily live there. And so many men aren't even single. Genuinely, every time I go out now and I'm having a flirtation with someone, I actively ask them if they're single or not. And so I was like, with this guy, I just cut straight to the chase. And it worked. I'm sure other situations it wouldn't have worked, but like with this guy, it worked. And I felt like $1 million.
I love it. Just cut to the chase. I mean, otherwise you can spend 3 hours chatting to someone and find out they don't live there or they're not available.
If you love PSI Love Me and want to dive in deeper, then join the Evolve Woman, my 8-week online coaching program, which will take you on a transformative journey of self-discovery, fulfillment, and to find the joy and love you so deserve. Check out my Instagram, Linda Williams Coach, to find out more.
Do you think with the introduction of apps over the last few years, do you think people still chat each other up and get approached as much as before? Or do you think people have become a little bit lazy and relying on the apps and not really making an effort when they go out? Other things coming to play of this as well, with respecting women's boundaries and not feeling like you're coming across as creepy, and that works both ways. What are your thoughts on all of this?
It's hard for me to answer genuinely because I was never approached a lot in a bar. And generally, I've never been approached a lot in a bar. So I don't really have like a before and after situation. What I have felt on the apps is that there is more laziness now because of the apps. I could swipe on you and I can have a conversation, or I could just carry on swiping. And that's actually one of the reasons why I got off them recently, because I had swiped on someone. The algorithm said that we were a match, and I immediately dismissed it and carried on swiping instead of stopping and engaging with the person and sending them a message. And I took a moment of reflection, and I looked at myself and I said, why are you on here? You're not on here to swipe. You're on here to find a match and go on a date and potentially have a relationship. So I would say that. And personally, I've also found that I found men to become a little bit lazier on apps in the sense of making an effort. There's a lot of like, hey, or responding to my question, but not engaging back. Now, to be fair, many times they might be doing that because they're not interested, but they just don't want to deal with dismissing me. There's a terrible way to phrase it. They don't want to be honest and be like, no, thanks, I'm going to unmatch. But I do feel like the more we've gone online, the less we've kind of, we've lost a bit of manners, just general social decorum about how to treat other people. And I have to believe that that's also coming into the real world in terms of whether people are approaching people in the real world or not. They've lost that confidence.
Yeah, and just striking up a genuine conversation, like they're actually reading your profile, seeing what you're interested in, seeing what you do on the weekend, like, have you got any crazy hobbies that are a bit out of the norm? And like mentioning that in an opening line, it means they've actually read it, not just looking at your pictures as well.
Right. I mean, anecdotally, how people describe the difference between men and women using dating apps is that men will look at a couple of pictures. If they think, yeah, all right, they'll swipe right. And then later when they match, then they'll go back and analyze the rest of your profile and see what they actually think of you. Whereas women are different, right? Women will pretty much go through all your photos first. Then they'll read through all the words that you've written. Then they'll look at your photos again. Then they'll be like, could I imagine this? Okay, yes or no. And that's why I think you'll hear men say, or even statistically, men swipe on 100 women and get one match, because I think they're swiping right positively at a higher frequency than women. But we also have different approaches to it.
And there's something else that we have in common. Well, we both worked, lived, and dated in Singapore for many years, and we're both now back in the UK. I mean, I'd love to have a chat to you about dating in Singapore and as an expat specifically. I mean, but let's look at some stats, really. I mean, if we're looking at the UK, there's 67 million people in the UK. If you're looking at London alone, there's about 9 million people down there. And the whole island and country of Singapore, there's 6 million people, right? Then you're looking at expats. Okay, so how many are non-residents? Because you're likely to date someone who is an expat. It's not always the case, but someone with similar like experiences and interests and why they're there, etc. So then we're looking at how many non-residents? 1.8 million. 1.5 million of those non-residents are migrant workers. And the amazing people who help run the city, they're the helpers, the cleaners, the construction laborers, they're building the condos, they're the gardeners, keeping Singapore green. So when you take all those stats away, you're probably left with about 300,000 people there who are expats. And then I'm not even breaking that down again by gender, age? Are they actually single? Do they have the same values, morals, interests, and what we want in life? So it's a really small dating pool. What was your experience over there?
I moved to Singapore very much because I wanted to. Like, it was a choice. But what I was excited about was to connect with other people, specifically English people who had chosen Singapore, right? Like, you can be an expat anywhere in the world. And I think you're somewhat different if you're choosing to move to South America versus Africa versus India versus Australia. And so what I was excited about was already that felt like there was going to be a lot of room for common ground because amongst the expat community, because it's like, okay, we've come from here and we've chosen to be here. And that definitely played out. And you're right, generally speaking, and, this is always a little bit of a touchy subject to step around, because to be someone who says, I am a white English woman who is also interested in English men, I can sometimes get accused of being not culturally integrating and being racist or being snobby. It's nothing to do with that. Like, I dated people from all races and nationalities while I was in Singapore, including Singaporeans. My preference is English people because that's my culture. That's my humor, which is a really foundational part of how I build any kind of relationship with somebody. Now, what happens in Singapore is there is this sort of dating hierarchy, and lo and behold, expat women are at the bottom of that hierarchy. And guess who's at the top? Expat men, specifically white expat men. Because what happens is, they joke about how if you were a 6 out of 10 guy in England, you move to Asia and you're a 9 out of 10 guy. And you've got the pick of the litter, right? The expat women want to date you and the local women want to date you. Meanwhile, the expat women recognize you are a 6 in London and you're not the 9 you think you are. Whereas the local women have different expectations and desires, and they're the ones who think that you're a 9. If I was a guy and if I was a heterosexual guy and women were saying to me, you're a 9 out of 10 for me, you're brilliant, you're funny, you're charming, you're attractive, I would be that way too. Like, why, everybody has ego and it's nice to be flattered in that way. But what then ends up happening is you've got Singaporean women who will date expat men or Singaporean men, Singaporean men who will pretty much only date Singaporean women. It definitely happens, but pretty much only date Singaporean women. So there's a very even smaller pool of those numbers that you shared earlier, even the 300K expat non-migrant community available for you to date in. And it becomes a frustrating dating pool. It's not to say it's impossible, but it definitely becomes a frustrating experience. So it was one of the reasons I left Singapore was because of the dating experience that I had there. I was tired of fishing in a very small pond.
I agree with what you were saying there. And just to add to that, I also found that it felt quite transient. Like, a lot of men were there for a short time, 2 or 3 years. The industries that people and men and guys generally moved to Singapore were finance. A lot of them I found were quite status focused as well. And I'm a country girl at heart. I'm a farmer's daughter. So I struggled to find earthy kind of, I don't want to say wood chopping, but I struggled to find like salt of the earth, down to earth, like no bullshit guys, if I'm honest, because they're all in those big, corporate roles.
Yeah, Singapore is not farmland.
No, and there's no country there. There is no country in Singapore. There's no countryside. So yeah, I found it was struggling. I found it a struggle to find someone with kind of a background similar to mine. And yes, I was a city girl for 20 years of my life, and I love the city, but equally, I'm a country girl at heart, and I love the outdoors. I love nature. I'm not interested in being driven around in a supercar at the weekend and being taken to a 3 Michelin star restaurant and being bought a handbag. Like, that's far from me. So yeah, I struggled to an extent on the dating scene in Singapore as well. And there's many reasons why I left Singapore, but that was also one of them, like yours.
Ultimately, no matter whether you're in a relationship or you're single, for me, there is a difference between life and lifestyle. The lifestyle of Singapore is incredible, right? You've got travel, food, culture, amazing weather. But what I quickly came to realize is that the way I define living a happy and successful life is with the people that I surround myself with, both friendship and romantic. And on the romantic front, it just wasn't clicking. Look, I've lived in the US. It clicked even less over there for me. But I just found that it wasn't clicking for me. And I sort of recognized that, there were I just resonate, I connect best with English people. And I felt like it was time to come home, just generally speaking. And this was a better pond to go fishing in. But look, the flip side of that is I've gone from a 6 million person country to a 9 million person city. And when I'm unable to find people to connect with, specifically romantically here, it can in a way be more frustrating. Because I'm like, wait, but there's more people, there's more opportunity, and I still can't get a boyfriend? Sometimes that can be more disheartening. But it's just, then that goes back to the larger aspect of dating. Like, there's highs and lows, and you just got to keep going.
And do you not find, like, once you've been an expat, nowhere's home? Because you were a foreigner in the country you're living in abroad. And then when you come back, you actually feel like a foreigner in your own home, with everyone kind of like, oh, look at you, tropical girl. Where have you been for the last, 15, 20 years and all these amazing experiences? Well, you're not like us round here, that type of thing. Those types of conversations can come up when you start dating. Like, wow, you've been everywhere in the world. Wow, you lived here, you lived there. I've never left London. Those types of conversations strike up as well, and could be a bit intimidating for some guys.
And I will say that also helps me quickly figure out if this is someone I'm going to be compatible with or not. Because being international, I've spent pretty much my entire life living in other countries. And I am very comfortable with that sense of otherness and that cultural experience, diversity. And so I don't come from a place of judgment. But if you are someone who was born, raised, and will die in one town, we are never going to be compatible. My life is all about, that's a big aspect of how I define myself, as being international. So it helps me filter that out pretty quickly. No, you don't have to want to move to Singapore. You have to have a desire to experience other cultures on a regular basis for us to even have anything in common.
Yeah, and have that open-mindedness and curiosity about, what's it like to live in another country, and that respects that, you up sticks and traveled the world and lived in the US and Singapore. Do you think it's more difficult for high-achieving, ambitious women like yourself to date?
What I definitely acknowledge is that the longer I am single, the more independent I am, the higher the threshold for someone to be good enough for me to say, yeah, I pick you and I want to date you. And I don't mean that in terms of superiority. I mean that in the sense of, I lived this incredible life single. For me to share my life with you, you have to enhance it. And already my standard of life is already very high. So I think that's where the challenge is. But I also I've never had any fear about being able to find somebody. I've had plenty of frustration that how long it's taking and the trials and tribulations along the way. And specifically for me, because I speak so openly on social media, a troll comment that I get very regularly is like, oh, you'll never meet somebody, you're too outspoken, or you need to mute your personality. I've even had people telling me how to dress. I get it all. And I think to myself, the right person for me, none of that will matter, right?
Be you, so the right person can find you. If you're going to be the same as everyone else, muted, wearing the same clothes as everyone else, not being you, the right person can't find you.
Yes, exactly. So, do I think there is a shift nowadays that women don't need men? They choose to have men, and are there plenty of men who are grappling with how do they navigate that space where it's not the very traditional role of I am man, I make money, you are woman, you stay at home. I'd do it if I banged my chest. But I think there are plenty of men who can navigate in that space. And I have dated plenty of men that are not intimidated by me in any capacity. And those dynamics or situationships just didn't work out for other reasons. But I will never mute myself nor allow anybody else or never encourage anybody else to do that.
100% agree. And the guys that you've dated, that you've had great experiences with and love you for who you are normally the ones that are secure within themselves. It's normally the insecure guys I've found personally that can't take a successful woman who's articulate, who's intelligent, who can speak about matters of the heart, who's well-traveled. It's normally the insecure guys I've found that have an issue with it.
Right, exactly. And I have many role models of what a good partner should look like in my friends, even in my siblings. And I recognize that I don't have the full picture, right? Like, even if I see my friends multiple times a week, I do somewhat see the best of them. I don't see the realities of, a Sunday night at 6 p.m. and the dishes haven't been cleared. Like, that's the reality of a relationship. But what I see is a true partnership amongst so many of my friends in terms of about being the breadwinner, about caring for the children, about sharing the responsibilities of home, about supporting each other in the good times and the bad. And that set this gold standard for me. And actually, even my friends alone have set a standard for me. Like, how my friends make me feel and how they support me is the base level of what I would need a romantic partner to also do.
That's such a good thing, and a good takeaway from this podcast is choose someone that you feel as comfortable with as you do with your best friends, because you are looking for a best friend at the end of the day as well as a romantic connection. So do you feel supported? Do you feel that they're there for you? Do you feel like, does your cup feel full once you've spent a few hours with them? Do you feel re-energized? Are you having fun? Like, laughter and humor, I think, is one of the most underrated things ever. Like, do they make you laugh?
That is exactly right. And I will say, one of my best friends is a guy who is married. And I've spent a lot of time with him. And I said to his wife, who's also my best friend, I said, my relationship with your husband is so good that it's kind of a standard. And she said to me, she's like, but Candice, no, you also see the best of him. Like, when you go out for dinners, anybody's in a good, happy mood when they're at a restaurant having a good time and there's drinks involved. But even though you come over on a Sunday and you spend the afternoon hanging out with our kids, you also see us in our good moments. So I found that really helpful because she reminded me that relationships are not as perfect as they can look from the outside, right? Like, the grass is never greener both ways. I have people in relationships always asking me, oh, what's it like being single? Oh, tell me about dating apps. Oh, I've never been on a dating app. I'd love to try. And also, whereas I'm on the other side of the fence being like, oh, what's it like in a relationship? I would love to get over that. So it's about sort of having, a healthy perspective, a realistic perspective about it.
I agree. And, when you thick into dating like 3 or 4 months in, you're really starting to understand who someone actually is, because we're all on our best behavior those first few dates, and perhaps some people have a mask on to begin with, but I always think, like, when a spanner gets thrown in the works, that's when you truly see who someone is as a human being. So it could be the car breaks down, or someone dog's died, or something at work, something catastrophic has happened at work and one of them has got made redundant. And that's when you really see someone's true values and how they show up is dealing with kind of mild trauma, or when shit hits the fan, like, how are they showing up as a person? How do they individually deal with something that's difficult? And how do they support you if you're going through something difficult or traumatic? Because you want them by your side, like, through thick and thin, being there for you through all the highs and lows of life.
Yeah, I mean, very easy for me to say this on the outside, but I had a friend who was in a very happy, healthy relationship, but they met when they were like 19. and they very much looked like they were on the path to getting married. And I kind of felt that they had never really been tested. They had never had, I don't know, a breakup or a massive argument. And in a way, I had a little bit of concern about that. I didn't want my friend to be in an argument, and I didn't want her to be sad. But at the same time, I felt that the tests are when you can really, validate whether you are the right partner for each other.
Agree. Like, are you going to be in the trenches with me or not?
Yeah, exactly. I've got a question for you, Linda, because I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and stepping back from the relationship and really to the early stages of dating. How do you feel about whether or not there should be a spark on a first date or even a second date? Do you feel that that's needed, or is that something that comes later?
That's so interesting, because there's a lot of debates out there that talk about the chemistry. Oh, there was a spark. There's got to be chemistry for me to take it forward. I'm in two minds, actually. Like, on those first couple of dates, you're really looking at, can they strike up a good conversation? Is the conversation flowing? Do we have things in common? Am I having a good time here? Because I do think chemistry can grow as well. And that energy, the more that you get to know someone. So I'm all for a slow burn as well. So I do think this initial spark, because the chemistry and spark does die down after a while, right? When that, hot honeymoon period is worn off and, you stop having sex 3 times a day. It's like back to normal living, right? You're doing the washing up and this and that and the other. And I'm on the fence. And there's a lot of talk about, should there be a spark? Should there be chemistry? I just think, just get to know someone, like 2 or 3, 4 dates, like get to know someone. Obviously, when you first meet someone, I think energy, I prefer to talk about it as energy versus chemistry. I'm more of an energy person, and I'm quite an intuitive person. So I'm more about the energy and like, do I want to hang out with this person? It's not necessarily, do I want to rip this person's clothes off and that spark? It's more like, am I vibing here? Is this person a good human being? Do I want to hang out with them? What is my gut saying? And it's something I teach a lot in my coaching, is the power of the gut, your gut intuition, like tapping into that. Heady hormones come up when we meet someone that, he could be like super good looking and like the sparks are there. But when you actually get to know someone, are they a good human? Like, do we have aligned interests and morals and values? And do we want the same things in life? Because when you're aligned on those things, that can actually be highly attractive. And you know what you were saying before about going up to people at dating events and chatting to people, even if you don't fancy them. But sometimes you can get chatting to someone and, you the conversation's flowing, you're asking the questions, you're finding out more about this person. You're like, actually, this person's really hot. Their energy's amazing. We've got so much in common. Our values are aligned. So it really is a tricky question to answer, because it depends on so many different variables. But I would just say, just be open-minded. Just because there isn't a spark there, ask yourself, like, is this person somebody that I could imagine going on another 2 or 3 dates with? Do I enjoy their company? That first date really is just seeing, like, is the conversation flowing? Are we aligned on these certain verticals? And then taking it from there.
Yeah, I tell you, it's really interesting to hear your perspective, because I've been thinking about it a lot recently relative to, what I've been doing before hasn't gotten me to a relationship. So maybe I need to think differently, including how I evaluate someone on a first date, or whether or not I feel a spark or not. There's one relationship expert I really admire called Logan Urey, who has a theory that says, F the spark, do the post-date 8. And she's basically crafted 8 questions that you should ask yourself after a date to really evaluate whether you should see them again. And they're things like, did I feel heard? Did I feel attractive in their presence? Do I feel more energized after the date or less energized? And those questions, she argues, are a better way to evaluate whether it's worth pursuing something and exploring something a little bit further with somebody else. And to be honest, I found it to be helpful. It allows me to take a bit more of a, let's call it objective, but it's still about feeling approach to it. But the flip side of all of that is, like you mentioned, I'm a very instinctive person. And I met a female friend, like a new female friend for the first time a couple of months ago. The second I met her, I fell madly in love with her. And I said, I want you to be my friend. And we've hung out so much since. And I think to myself, if I can still feel that, if I can feel a spark in a friendship capacity, then I don't think it's unfair for me to feel it in a romantic, to expect to want it in a romantic capacity too. But it's about balancing, like being open-minded and giving things a chance and giving things breathing room with also just knowing yourself and trusting your instincts. And that's what I'm kind of juggling at the moment.
Many of us can be swayed towards one versus the other, and it can override. So the head can go, oh, well, he's this, he's that, and the other, therefore he's a no-go. And our heart can be way overriding the gut and the head, and that's when you fall in love with the totally wrong person. I think the gut is just one of the most powerful decision-making areas that is massively underrated. And what people don't actually know is that what is made of the gut is also very similar cells in the brain, and we're sending signals from the gut to the brain as well, and people seem to forget that. And I think I've coached people with trauma and who've had really bad relationship experiences, and they just don't trust their gut anymore. So it's about rebuilding that gut instinct and that trust in yourself. And there's ways that you can do that by making decisions with your gut and journaling how you felt around in that certain situation that you made that decision on, and what happened afterwards. Were you right or were you wrong with that decision based on how you felt and what your gut was saying? And that's one way to build trust in your instincts as well. But I'm a massive I'm a massive advocate of gut. And I'm the same as well with new people I meet now, new friends I make. And it's just how do they make you feel and what's your gut saying?
I think that's a big one. How do they make you feel is really important. And I tell you, another lens that I look through is, could I imagine this person, could I imagine wanting this person to sit at dinner with my friends? Like, my friends are such an important aspect of my life. And could I imagine this person integrating with that? Now, I will say I have friends who when they first brought their partner to the group, we were a bit like, this girl or this guy, like, really? But then we grew to like them over time too. So again, it's not about, being like, oh, that would never happen and therefore dismissing, and still having open-mindedness. But also I think to myself, would I really want to introduce this person to my best friend? I think it's more helpful.
Exactly. And I agree, it works both ways. Like, because if they really are the right person for you, your friends will get on with them no matter what, because they're just happy that you're happy. But you're right, like, when you do spend a lot of time with your friends and your family, I'm the same with, like, I'm very close to my family. And I also think, like, how would they get along with them? And, around the Sunday roast. And people who have kids as well, like, how are they going to be in front of my kids and friends and family? There is a lot to consider when you're choosing your partner.
I know, and that's why I'm still saying there's so many things that I'm balancing, and I just haven't found somebody yet that clicks for me.
But you've totally got the right strategy. You're open, you put yourself out there, you have good self-confidence and esteem, you know yourself, and you also could easily be in a relationship. But because you're independent, you're really happy, and you're waiting for that right person to come along to add value, right? As you were saying before, like, you have an incredible life, you've got a great job, great friends, interests, financially independent. And you're like me, it's like we're waiting for that right person to come along and add to our life, not just to have someone just for the sake of a plus one and having a partner. So, yeah.
I'll admit, like, I think I mentioned earlier, I have had no doubt that I will find somebody. but I have had plenty of frustration and emotion along the way around how long it's taking, especially when I'm sort of one of the last women standing in my friendship group, and not just single, but also all my friends are at the stage where they're almost finished having children, right? They've had 2, 3, 4 children, and they're like, okay, I'm good now. And, to be the outsider of that is frustrating. But I just sort of accept that I have a different path, different schedule. And at the same time, I get to have a whole bunch of experiences and opportunities that they don't, right? Like I got to go off and have a whole, go on a mega holiday before Christmas, and they didn't, right? And it's not just about material things, but, I try to also remind myself about, A, I'm on a different path to those people, and B, I have this so much else that I am afforded by being single, and people that I get to meet by going to dating events and stuff that they don't. So
I'm the same. And I also think, people who are single in their late 30s and early 40s, by the time we found our person, we've traveled the world, we've worked all the interesting, crazy jobs, we've kind of got all of that out of our system. So we're kind of flipping it, whereas I find where people meet each other very young, and then they come out of having kids, and then they're getting going in their personal life and exploring. So it's all swings and roundabouts, whatever way you look at it. And single, always someone, there's always pluses and minuses to being single and having a partner. And it's just making the most of every situation you find yourself in.
yeah, exactly right. I hope more people feel that way too, and not feel despondent that, they're the single friend and it's never going to happen for them.
I know, and whiling their life away until I find someone. Like, go on a holiday on your own, go and do your favorite hobbies, like have a lie-in when you want, cook what you want, like, it's on your terms, your life when you're single, like make the most of it before you scooped up.
Like, actually, speaking of which, the other day I posted a story on my Instagram saying, oh, the joys of being single and childless. I slept for 10 hours last night. And the number of people who specifically have children who are like, I have no idea what that is like. I cannot tell you the last time I slept for 10 hours. And I'm like, oh yeah, these are the perks.
I know. And Christmas just gone. Most of my friends have kids and are married. What do you do for self-care? And I'm not just talking about having a bath and a massage and doing your exercise. What do you do that really makes you feel good mentally and emotionally, not just physically?
Spending time with my friends, specifically eating with them, like having dinner, be it at a restaurant or at their house, really fills my cup, and was a big reason why I chose to move from Singapore to England. I think I always say this because I think people have a lot of misconceptions about extroverted people, that we're just constantly go, go, go and high energy. I also spend a lot of time chilling on the sofa, watching TV and watching movies and stuff. That allows me to sort of, re-energize just as much as being with my friends re-energize me. And my current complete obsession, I cannot tell you the last time I took to an activity or a hobby like I've taken to this, is playing paddle.
I saw on your Instagram.
I am beyond obsessed. And what is also so wonderful about it is it's an incredibly social activity. At a minimum, each game is 4 people. So already you're meeting new people, and you've got people of all ages. It's competitive, but it's social. So that's been just such a wonderful discovery for me, because it's about being active, meeting new people, learning a new hobby. So I would definitely say that that's very much something I'm doing at the moment that just gives me so much energy.
And I also think that when you're in your prime, doing the things that you love doing, whether it's being with the people that you care about the most in life and spending time with them, or doing an activity that really kind of raises your vibration, it shows. Like, you're walking down the street or you're going into the room with that, your cup full and a sparkle in your eye. So, whilst you are single, as we were talking about before, do what fills your cup and makes you happy and gives you that energy and that high, because that will attract you to the right person, and they'll be attracted to you because you have similar interests. You're on the same vibration.
Yeah. And I will say, having gone to one paddle dating event before, it is a brilliant way to meet people, because whether you're a good player or you're a bad player, it doesn't matter because everyone kind of knows you're there for, multiple purposes. And it's such we talked about how do you approach someone. It's so low key to go up to someone and be like, hey, would you like to play the next game together? Right? It's not hitting on someone at a bar. You're not being forced to have a conversation with them. It's just a way to interact with people. So
it is an excuse. It's like, it's something that you've got in common. And just to wrap up, what are 3 things that you would like to share with our listeners that would help navigate their dating life?
I tell you what gives me strength throughout this whole process is I'm kind to myself about the dating experience, right? And that means fully giving into the crappy emotions when they arise. Like I remember this time last year, I had an unbelievable meltdown about, being single. I'd recently ended a situationship with somebody. I was frustrated that it was taking so long. And I just fully gave into that emotion. So I think that really is the first thing. It's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to feel rejected. It's okay to have all of those feelings and then just take a break, right? There's nothing wrong with taking a break to rebuild yourself, realign on what you're looking for. So I'd say above all else that just like be kind to yourself in the process. And then I would say also trust yourself. Like my tips are very much centered on me as opposed to what to do externally, because you have to be the best version of yourself. Like you mentioned earlier, you have to be happy in yourself in order to attract somebody at your best. So trust your instincts and your feelings. Still be open. And I'm really trying to do that, right? Maybe if I didn't feel a spark, I'll still go on a second date. But I just trust my instincts about how I feel about someone. And then I guess maybe the last one that is about how you show up or how you treat other people is about being open. My friend had said to me, just smile at everybody. And at first I was like, that could also be a bit kind of crazy looking. But I will say that since I've started doing that, specifically at dating events, since I've started like making sure my body language is open and making sure that I'm sort of smiling at everybody in the room, I've had a more positive experience. And I think I've kind of signaled to other people that, it's okay to approach me and maybe I'll approach you right back. So I would say be kind to yourself, trust your instincts, and be physically and mentally open.
Yeah, I love those. And in fact, the last tip is also about being kind to other people as well. Kindness wins every second of the day. Kind to yourself, kind to others, and trust your gut. So what is happening for you with the dating business over the next few months? Is there anything that we have to look forward to in the UK or Singapore?
Yeah, I need to start hosting the events in the UK. I've been to 8 different dating events over the last couple of months, just for my own benefit of meeting new people. And I would very much like to host my own events here. The crazy thing is even though I am English and even though I'm from London, it feels like a much bigger hurdle to set up events here than it did in Singapore. So there's, in a way, a confidence and also just logistics that I need to sort out. But I plan to go back to Singapore this year and host more events there. Got some really exciting partners lined up and we'll hopefully host a paddle dating event, which is very exciting for me. And so for me, I put even in my LinkedIn bio, I now am operating in the business of dating because finding a partner is important to me personally. And also I really enjoy working in this space professionally as well. So I definitely have dating on the brain at the moment.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And anyone that wants to keep up to date with Candice's adventures in dating, but also her dating events coming up both in the UK and Singapore, the Instagram handle is @Candilicious. So do hop onto there. I personally find it really inspiring, funny, just really raw and honest. You're a breath of fresh air. So thank you for joining us today. I'm sure our listeners will love listening to this conversation on dating adventures in and around the world. So
That's it for today's episode of PSI Love Me. I hope you've learned some interesting nuggets to weave into your everyday life to feel a little lighter, brighter, and inspired. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more high-achieving women like yourselves to find us. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Linda Williams Coach, for more daily inspiration and updates.